The phone buzzed in my palm for the 5th time in as many minutes. I stared at my mother's name flashing on the screen, each vibration sending a wave of dread through my body. I knew exactly what she wanted, what they all wanted, with a deep breath. I silenced the call and placed my phone face down on my desk, turning my attention back to the travel website glowing on my computer monitor. Pristine beaches, crystal clear waters, and palm trees swaying in the breeze mocked me from the screen. Maui. So close, yet impossibly far. Sheila, those quarterly reports aren't going to review themselves. I jumped at the sound of my boss's voice, quickly clicking to minimize the Hawaii vacation package I'd been staring at for the past 20 minutes. Sorry, Mark. I'll have them on your desk by 4, I said, forcing a smile. He nodded and continued, down the hallway without another word. As a marketing specialist at Henderson & Mills, I was good at my job. At 32, I'd carved out a respectable career, earned a decent salary, and created award-winning campaigns. What I wasn't good at was standing up to my family. My phone vibrated again. This time, I picked it up. Hi, Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral despite the knot forming in my stomach. Sheila Marie Harmon, why haven't you been answering your phone? I've been calling you all morning. Her voice was shrill, the familiar accusatory tone making me wince. I'm at work, Mom. I can't always answer. I lowered my voice, glancing around to make sure none of my coworkers were within earshot. Well, your father and I have been talking, and we've decided on the Bahamas this year. Jessica already confirmed she can get the time off in July, so we need you to book everything by next week. The all-inclusive resort, the one with the swim-up bar your father likes. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight settle on my chest. For the past 6 years, I'd been financing my family's annual vacations, trips that always seemed to grow more extravagant each year. My parents both retired early due to what they called health concerns, but what I recognized as simply not wanting to work anymore had come to expect these yearly getaways. My younger sister Jessica, perpetually between jobs or working part-time, gigs that never lasted, was always eager to join in. Actually, Mom, I began, my voice barely above a whisper. I was thinking of taking a different kind of trip this year. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. What do you mean, different? The ice in her voice was unmistakable. I've been saving up, and I thought I might go to Hawaii, by myself. The words tumbled out before I could stop them, my heart racing as I finally gave voice to the desire I'd been nurturing in secret for months. Another beat of silence, and then, by yourself? What about us? We always vacation together, Sheila. It's our family tradition. A tradition that had begun when my first big marketing bonus came in. A tradition that had drained my savings account year after year while I watched my family enjoy luxuries I could barely afford for myself. I know, but I've never been to Hawaii. And I just thought, your father will be so disappointed, she cut in, her tone shifting from icy to wounded. You know how much these trips mean to him, how much they mean to all of us after everything we've done for you. And there it was, the guilt trip that never failed to work, the invisible chains that kept me bound to their expectations. After everything they'd done for me, a mantra repeated so often I'd almost come to believe it, despite the fact that I'd been financially independent since college and had been supporting them more than they'd ever supported me. We'll discuss this at dinner on Sunday, she declared before I could respond. Your father and Jessica will want to weigh in. 6 o'clock, don't be late. The line went dead before I could say another word. I sat there, phone in hand, staring blankly at my computer screen where I'd reopened the Hawaiian vacation package. The images seemed to taunt me now, a freedom I dared to reach for, only to have it snatched away. Again. My coworker Dana appeared in my cubicle doorway, her expression concerned. Everything okay? You look like you just got some bad news. I forced a smile. Just family stuff, the usual. She leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. Let me guess, another luxury vacation you're expected to fund? Dana was one of the few people who knew my situation. We'd become friends shortly after I started at Henderson and Mills 4 years ago, and over many after-work drinks, I'd confided in her about my family's expectations and my inability to say no. Bahamas this year, I confirmed with a weak laugh. All-inclusive, of course, she frowned. And what about your Hawaii plans? The ones you've been talking about for months? I shrugged, the gesture encompassing all the defeat I felt. There's always next year. Sheila, Dana said, her voice taking on the firm tone I'd come to recognize as her tough love voice. There's been a next year for as long as I've known you. When are you going to live your own life? Her words stung because they were true. How many dreams had I deferred? How many of my own desires had I set aside to meet my family's expectations? The weight of it all suddenly felt crushing. Sunday. Dinner, I said, more to myself than to Dana. They want to discuss it on Sunday. You're an adult, Sheila. You don't need their permission to take a vacation. I knew she was right, but knowing and doing were two very different things. The thought of confronting my family, of standing firm against the tide of guilt and manipulation that would surely come, made my stomach churn. I'll figure it out, I said, not believing the words even as they left my mouth. Dana gave me a look. That said, she didn't believe me either, but was kind enough not to say so. If you need backup, I'm here. Hell, I'll even come to that dinner with you if you want. The offer made me smile, a genuine one this time. Thanks, but I think this is something I need to handle on my own. As Dana left, I turned back to my computer, closed the Hawaii vacation tab, and pulled up the quarterly reports I was supposed to be reviewing. But my mind remained on Sunday's dinner and the confrontation to come. The rest of the week passed in a blur of work and anxiety. By the time Sunday arrived, I'd rehearsed what I wanted to say 100 times, but I still didn't feel prepared. Standing outside my parents' modest suburban home, I took a deep breath before ringing the doorbell. The house where I'd grown up hadn't changed much over the years. Same beige siding, same trimmed hedges, same welcome mat that had seen better days. But as I waited for someone to answer the door, I couldn't help but notice the new luxury SUV in the driveway, a purchase made possible, no doubt, by the money they'd saved not paying for their own vacations. The door swung open to reveal my sister Jessica, looking effortlessly stylish in designer jeans and a blouse that probably cost more than I spent on clothes in a month. At 28, she'd mastered the art of appearing successful without actually putting in the work to be so. Finally, Mom's been watching the clock for the last hour, she said, by way of greeting, pulling me in for a perfunctory hug that smelled of expensive perfume. I'm right on time, I pointed out, showing her my watch. 6 o'clock, exactly as instructed. Jessica shrugged. You know, Mom, come on, they're in the dining room. I followed her through the familiar hallway, past family photos that charted our growth, Jessica and me as children, as teenagers, as adults. In almost every recent picture, we were on some beach or at some resort, snapshots of vacations I'd financed but barely enjoyed, too stressed about the mounting costs to truly relax. My father was at the head of the dining table, newspaper in hand. At 58, Robert Harmon still had a full head of hair, though it had gone completely gray. He looked up as I entered, his expression giving nothing away. There she is, he said, folding his newspaper and setting it aside. We were beginning to think you weren't coming. It's exactly 6, Dad, I said, leaning down to kiss his cheek. Is it? Feels later. He checked his watch and frowned. Huh, guess you're right. My mother emerged from the kitchen, carrying a steaming casserole dish. Patricia Harmon had always been a striking woman, and at 56, she still took great pride in her appearance. Her hair was dyed a rich auburn, not a strand out of place, and her makeup was immaculate as always. Sheila, good, you're here. Help Jessica set the table. Not a hello, not a how are you, just straight to instructions. I bit back a sigh and did as I was told, helping Jessica lay out the plates and silverware while my mother brought out the rest of the meal. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, rolls. It was the same Sunday dinner she'd been making for as long as I could remember. A slice of unchanging normalcy in a world that kept shifting beneath my feet. Once everything was on the table, we took our usual seats. My father at the eyes head, my mother to his right, Jessica to his left, and me beside my mother. Grace was said, food was served, and for a few minutes we ate in relative silence. The only sounds the clinking of utensils against plates. "So," my father said finally, setting down his fork, "your mother tells me you're having second thoughts about our vacation this year." And there it was, the opening salvo. I took a sip of water, buying myself a few seconds. "Not second thoughts exactly," I said carefully. "I just thought I might do something different this year. Take a trip on my own." "To Hawaii," my mother added, the word dripping with disdain as if I'd suggested vacationing in a garbage dump. "Yes, to Hawaii," I confirmed, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've always wanted to go, and I've been saving up for it." "Saving up?" Jessica chimed in with a laugh. "You make plenty of money, Sheila. It's not like you have a family to support or anything." The irony of her statement wasn't lost on me, considering I was essentially supporting our parents, and by extension, her as well, but I let it pass. "I've been putting away a little each month specifically for this trip," I explained. "It's something I've wanted to do for a long time." "Well, that's very nice for you, dear," my mother said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. "But we've already started planning the Bahamas. Your father's heart is set on it, and you know how he gets when he's disappointed." My father nodded solemnly, as if his disappointment was a serious medical condition that needed to be avoided at all costs. "I understand that," I said, feeling my resolve beginning to crumble under their unified front. "But I was hoping you might understand that I'd like to do something for myself this once." "For yourself?" My mother's eyebrows shot up. "Sheila, don't you think that sounds a bit selfish? We're talking about a family tradition here. A tradition that's only 6 years old," I pointed out, "and that I've paid for entirely each time." A heavy silence fell over the table. My father's face darkened, my mother's lips pressed into a thin line, and Jessica stared at me as if I'd just grown a second head. "So that's what this is about? Money?" My father's voice was dangerously quiet. "After everything we've done for you, you're begrudging us a little vacation time together?" "It's not about the money, Dad," I said, although it partly was. "It's about me wanting to do something for myself for once. I work hard, I help out when you need it, and I've never complained about funding our family vacations. But just this once, I'd like to take a trip that I want to take." "I don't believe what I'm hearing," my mother said, placing her napkin on the table with a deliberate motion that signaled her displeasure. "We raised you better than this, Sheila. Family comes first, always. That's what we taught you." "Family should go both ways, Mom," I said quietly. "It should be about supporting each other, not just one person always giving and everyone else always taking," Jessica scoffed. "Oh, please, like you're so put upon. You have a great job, a nice apartment. Some of us aren't so lucky." "Luck has nothing to do with it," I shot back, my frustration finally finding its voice. "I worked hard for everything I have. I put myself through college, I built my career from nothing. And I'm happy to help when you need it, but I need something for myself too. After everything we sacrificed for you." My mother's voice trembled with emotion, though whether it was genuine or for effect, I couldn't tell anymore. "We gave you everything, Sheila. Everything. Did you?" The question slipped out before I could stop it, years of repressed feelings suddenly bubbling to the surface. Because from where I'm sitting, I've been the one making sacrifices lately. Every bonus, every raise, goes to supporting these family vacations or helping out when Jessica's between jobs or when you and Dad decide to buy a new car instead of saving for retirement. "How dare you!" My father's fist came down on the table, making the dishes jump. "We're your parents. We clothed you, fed you, put a roof over your head. When I was a child, Yes, I interrupted, a strange calm settling over me now that the dam had broken. And I'm grateful for that. But I'm an adult now, and I've been on my own for a long time. I love you all, but I need to live my own life too. By abandoning your family? My mother's eyes filled with tears. By running off to Hawaii while we're left behind? It's one vacation, Mom. 1 week where I do something just for me. And what about next year? Jessica demanded. Will you abandon us then too? I looked at each of them in turn. My father's anger, my mother's manipulative tears, my sister's entitled indignation. In that moment, I saw them clearly, perhaps for the first time. This wasn't about a family vacation or even about money. It was about control. It was about them seeing me not as a person with my own needs and desires, but as a resource to be used for their benefit. I don't know about next year, I said honestly, but I do know that I'm going to Hawaii and I'm going alone. The explosion that followed was everything I'd feared and more. My father shouted about ingratitude and disrespect. My mother cried and reminded me of every sacrifice she'd ever made, real or imagined. Jessica called me selfish and heartless. And through it all, I sat there, strangely detached, as if watching the scene unfold from a distance. When there was finally a lull in the tirade, I stood up. I think I should go. Yes, I think you should, my father said coldly. And don't bother coming back until you've remembered what family means. That's the thing, Dad, I said, gathering my purse. I think I'm finally starting to understand exactly what family means to all of you. I walked out of that house feeling both lighter and heavier than I had in years. Lighter because I'd finally spoken my truth, heavier because I knew nothing would ever be the same again. As I drove home, tears streamed down my face. Not for the vacation I was determined to take, but for the family dynamics I was finally seeing clearly for what they were. Back in my apartment, I curled up on my couch with a glass of wine, my phone buzzing incessantly with texts and calls from my family. I ignored them all and instead opened my laptop, navigating back to the Hawaiian vacation package I'd been eyeing for months. With a deep breath and a sense of both trepidation and exhilaration, I clicked Book Now. As I entered my credit card information and confirmed the reservation, I felt something settle inside me, a sense of rightness, of finally honoring my own needs. The trip was set for 3 months from now, in July, the same month my family had planned for the Bahamas. It would give me time to save a bit more, to plan what I wanted to do, and hopefully to repair some of the damage done at dinner. Because despite everything, they were still my family, and I did love them, even if I was finally learning that love shouldn't mean sacrificing myself. Little did I know that booking that trip would set off a chain of events that would transform not just my vacation plans, but my entire life. The aftermath of Sunday's dinner was exactly as chaotic as I'd expected. My phone blew up with messages, guilt trips from my mother, angry tirades from my father, passive-aggressive jabs from Jessica. I read them all, but responded to none, needing time to process my own emotions before engaging with theirs. By Wednesday, the messages had taken on a different tone, moving from anger to bargaining. My mother suggested that perhaps we could do both trips, Hawaii as a family, and then the Bahamas the following year. My father, in a rare direct text, said we could discuss options if I was willing to be reasonable. Jessica simply sent a series of increasingly dramatic crying emoji. I finally responded to my mother with a simple message. I've already booked my trip, and I'm going alone. I love you all, but I need this for myself. The response was immediate, a phone call that I let go to voicemail, followed by a long message about how I was breaking her heart, how she'd never thought her own daughter could be so cruel, how she didn't recognize me anymore. Dana found me in the break room at work, staring blankly at my phone after listening to that voicemail. That bad, huh? She asked, sliding into the chair across from me. I nodded, placing my phone face down on the table. They're acting like I've announced I'm joining a cult, not taking a solo vacation. Because to them, it's just as threatening, Dana pointed out. You're breaking the pattern, asserting your independence. That's scary for people who are used to controlling you. I just don't understand why this has to be such a big deal, I sighed, running a hand through my hair. It's one vacation. It's not about the vacation, Sheila. It's about what it represents. You're setting a boundary, maybe for the first time. That changes everything. She was right, and deep down, I knew it. This wasn't just about a trip to Hawaii. It was about taking back control of my life, about recognizing my own worth and needs apart from what I could provide for my family. The next few weeks settled into an uneasy pattern. My family cycled through various tactics: guilt, anger, manipulation, and occasionally, when those didn't work, grudging acceptance that would quickly revert to one of the other strategies. I stood firm, reminding myself daily why this was important, why I deserved this one thing just for me. Then, a month after that fateful Sunday dinner, my mother called with a different approach. "We've been thinking," she said, her voice dripping, with false cheer, "and we've decided to join you in Hawaii." I nearly dropped the phone. "What? Isn't it wonderful? We can all be together after all. Your father found a great deal on flights, and we can stay at the same resort. Jessica's so excited. She's always wanted to see Hawaii." My heart sank as I realized what was happening. They weren't respecting my decision to go alone. They were simply changing tactics. Instead of stopping me from going to Hawaii, they would insert themselves into my trip, ensuring I couldn't escape their influence even there. "Mom, I appreciate the thought, but that's not what I want," I said as firmly as I could. "I specifically booked this trip to have some time to myself." "Don't be ridiculous, Sheila. Why would you want to be alone in such a beautiful place? Family vacations are always more fun." "Not for me," I said, surprising myself with my bluntness. "Not when I'm constantly worrying about whether everyone's having a good time, whether the activities are to Dad's liking, whether the restaurants are up to your standards, whether Jessica's bored. This trip is for me to relax and do what I want to do." There was a pause on the other end of the line, then, "I see. Well, we've already booked our flights, so I suppose we'll just have to make the best of it. We arrive on the 15th, same as you." My heart raced as panic set in. They'd actually done it. Booked flights to the same destination on the same day, without even asking if I was okay with it. It was a level of boundary crossing that shocked even me, who'd grown up with their manipulations. "Mom, please don't do this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Please respect that I need this time alone." "Family sticks together, Sheila," she replied, her tone making it clear the discussion was over. "We'll see you at the airport." The line went dead, and I sat there, phone in hand, feeling a strange mixture of despair and determination. They were going to come whether I wanted them to or not. They were going to hijack my carefully planned solo vacation and turn it into another family obligation, unless I didn't let them. The thought came to me suddenly, a solution so simple yet so audacious that it made my pulse quicken. What if I changed my plans? What if I went somewhere else entirely and just didn't tell them? The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. It would mean actively deceiving my family, something I'd never done before. But it would also mean protecting the boundaries I'd fought so hard to establish. I needed advice, someone to tell me if I was completely crazy for even considering such a drastic step. So I called the one person I knew would give me an honest opinion. "They did what?" Dana's voice rose in disbelief as I explained the situation over dinner at her apartment that evening. "Booked flights to Hawaii to coincide with my trip," I repeated, still hardly believing it myself. "They're planning to stay at the same resort and everything. That's not normal, Sheila. You realize that, right? That's some serious boundary violation." I nodded, pushing my pasta around my plate. "I know. That's why I'm thinking of changing my plans." "Changing how?" "Going somewhere else. Canceling Hawaii and booking a different destination without telling them." Dana's eyes widened, then a slow smile spread across her face. That's brilliant. You think so? It feels a bit extreme. Extreme times call for extreme measures. They've shown they won't respect your boundaries, so you need to take more drastic steps to protect them. She leaned forward, suddenly excited. Where would you go instead? I hadn't gotten that far in my thinking. I don't know. Somewhere they wouldn't expect, I guess. Bali, Dana suggested immediately. It's amazing, it's far away, and it's not a place your family would think to look for you. Bali? The idea was intriguing. I'd never considered it before, but as soon as Dana mentioned it, images of lush landscapes, ancient temples, and pristine beaches filled my mind. Trust me, it's paradise. My sister went last year and couldn't stop talking about it for months. Plus, it's so different from Hawaii that it would still give you that exotic vacation experience you're looking for. I pulled out my phone and did a quick search. The photos that came up were breathtaking. Verdant rice terraces, crystal clear waters, vibrant cultural experiences, and most importantly, it was thousands of miles away from where my family would be. I'd have to eat the cost of the Hawaii trip, I mused, thinking about the non-refundable deposit I'd already paid. Dana shrugged. Consider it the price of freedom. Besides, Bali can be a lot more affordable than Hawaii once you're there. The more I thought about it, the more right it felt. It wasn't just about avoiding my family. It was about choosing something completely different, something that was entirely my own. I'm going to do it, I decided, a surge of determination washing over me. I'm going to cancel Hawaii and book Bali instead. And you're not going to tell them? Dana clarified, her expression serious despite the excitement in her voice. Not until I'm already there, I confirmed. They can have their Hawaii vacation without me. The logistics weren't simple. I had to cancel my Hawaii reservation, losing my deposit in the process, and book a new trip to Bali. I had to research a new destination, find accommodations, plan activities, all while maintaining the pretense to my family that I was still going to Hawaii. It was exhausting, but also oddly freeing. Each decision I made, each detail I planned, was entirely for me. There was no consideration of my father's preferences, or my mother's comfort, or my sister's entertainment. Just my own desires, my own interests. As the weeks passed and July drew closer, my family's messages became more focused on the upcoming trip. They sent links to activities in Hawaii they wanted to do, restaurants they planned to visit, even a day-by-day itinerary my mother had meticulously crafted. I responded non-committally, not wanting to lie outright, but unable to tell them the truth just yet. Are you nervous? Dana asked as we had coffee a week before my departure date. Terrified, I admitted. What if they never forgive me for this? Then they'll be proving exactly why you needed to do it in the first place, she pointed out. If they can't understand why you needed this for yourself, if they can't respect your boundaries even after such a clear statement, then maybe it's time to reevaluate your relationship with them altogether. The thought was painful, but necessary. I'd spent my entire adult life trying to please my family, trying to earn their approval and love through financial support and self-sacrifice. What if that wasn't enough? What if it would never be enough? You're right, I said finally. This isn't just about a vacation anymore. It's about standing up for myself, even if it means facing some difficult truths about my family. The day of departure arrived with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation churning in my stomach. My suitcase was packed with lightweight clothing suitable for Bali's tropical climate. My passport was tucked safely in my travel wallet, and my phone was fully charged, ready for the barrage of messages I knew would come once my family realized I wasn't in Hawaii. As I locked my apartment door and headed for the taxi waiting outside, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Can't wait to see you in Hawaii tomorrow. We're so excited for our family vacation. Love, Mom. I didn't respond. Instead, I silenced my phone and slipped it into my bag. The time for explanations would come, but not yet. Right now, I had a plane to catch, A plane that would take me not to Hawaii, but to Bali, where for the first time in my adult life, I would be truly on my own, answerable to no one but myself. The journey to Bali was long, over 20 hours of travel time with layovers. But as the plane began its descent into Denpasar International Airport, and I caught my first glimpse of the island through the window, lush greenery stretching to meet azure waters, I knew I'd made the right decision. It was early morning local time when I landed, the air warm and heavy with humidity as I stepped off the plane. The first thing that struck me was the scent, a heady mixture of tropical flowers, incense, and the faint saltiness of the sea. It was intoxicating, completely different from anything I'd experienced before, and I took a deep breath, letting it fill my lungs. After clearing customs and collecting my luggage, I found the driver I'd arranged to take me to my accommodations, a small, locally owned villa in Ubud, the cultural heart of Bali. As we drove through the morning traffic, I took in the sights: motorbikes weaving through cars, roadside stalls selling colorful offerings, temples with intricate stone carvings peeking out from between more modern buildings. It was exactly as beautiful as I'd imagined, and more importantly, it was nothing like Hawaii. There would be no chance of accidentally running into my family here. My villa was a small slice of paradise, a private bungalow set in a lush garden with a small plunge pool and a veranda overlooking a ravine filled with jungle vegetation. The owner, a kind-faced Balinese woman named Kadek, showed me around the property, explaining the amenities and offering suggestions for local experiences. "You are alone?" she asked as she handed me the keys. "Yes," I replied, realizing with a start that it was the first time I'd said those words aloud without a hint of apology or explanation. "Just me," she nodded approvingly. "Good. Bali is perfect place for finding yourself. You will leave different person, I think." Her words stayed with me as I unpacked and settled into my temporary home. Would I leave a different person? Was that what I was hoping for? Not just a vacation, but a transformation? My phone, which I'd kept on airplane mode during the journey, seemed to burn in my pocket. I knew I needed to turn it on, to face the messages that would inevitably be waiting. But not yet. I wanted to savor these first few hours of freedom, of peace, before the storm that would surely come. Instead, I spent that first day exploring the area around my villa, visiting a local market, sampling strange and delicious fruits, wandering through a sacred monkey forest where long-tailed macaques watched me curiously from tree branches. I ate lunch at a small warung, local restaurant, where the spices in the food made my eyes water and my soul sing. I browsed shops filled with handcrafted jewelry, textiles, and art, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I didn't once think about whether someone else was enjoying themselves, whether the activities would meet with approval, whether the expenses were justified. I simply experienced purely and selfishly for my own pleasure. It wasn't until evening, as I sat on my veranda with a glass of local rice wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, that I finally turned on my phone. Notifications came in a flood. Missed calls, voicemails, texts, even emails. Most were from my family, growing increasingly frantic as the day had progressed, and I hadn't appeared at the Honolulu airport as expected. The most recent text, from my sister, made my heart contract painfully. "Mom's freaking out. Dad's talking about calling the police. Where are you?" With trembling fingers, I composed a group text to my parents and Jessica. "I'm safe. I decided to change my vacation plans. I'm not in Hawaii and won't be joining you there. I'm sorry for the worry I've caused, but please understand that I needed to do this for myself. Enjoy your time in Hawaii, and we can talk when I return." I hesitated before adding, "Please respect my need for space right now. I'll check in periodically so you know I'm safe, but I'm turning off notifications for a while." Then, before I could second-guess myself, I sent the message and put my phone on Do Not Disturb mode. They would be angry, hurt, confused, all. The emotions I'd been dreading. But for now at least, those feelings were thousands of miles away, and I was here, in this beautiful place, finally doing something just for me. As Kadek had predicted, Bali began to work its magic on me almost immediately. There was something about the island, its rhythms, its beauty, its spiritual energy that invited introspection and healing. My days fell into a gentle pattern. Mornings began early with yoga on my veranda as the jungle came alive with birdsong. Breakfast was fresh tropical fruits and strong Balinese coffee served in my garden. Then I would venture out, exploring a different aspect of the island each day. Ancient temples with stone guardians draped in black and white checkered cloth. Rice terraces carved into mountainsides like giant steps for gods. Villages where artisans practiced crafts passed down through generations. Every few days, I would turn on my phone briefly, send a short message to my family confirming I was safe, and then turn notifications off again. Their responses ranged from anger, "How? Could you do this to us?" to manipulation, "Your father's blood pressure is through the roof because of your selfishness," to grudging acceptance, "At least let us know where you are." I responded to none of these messages, offering only my periodic check-ins. It was a boundary I was determined to maintain, even as guilt threatened to creep in around the edges of my resolve. A week into my stay, I met Marcus, an American expatriate who ran a small cafe near my villa. In his mid-40s, with sun-weathered skin and laugh lines around his eyes, Marcus had come to Bali a decade earlier for a 2-week vacation and never left. "Sometimes a place just grabs hold of your soul and won't let go," he told me as we sat at a corner table in his cafe, sipping ginger tea. "Sounds like woo-woo nonsense until it happens to you." I found myself sharing my story with him, my family's expectations, my rebellion, my escape to Bali. He listened without judgment, nodding, occasionally as if my experience was one he'd heard many times before. "You know," he said when I'd finished, "there's a Balinese concept called Tri Hita Karana. It means 3 causes of well-being: harmony with God, harmony with other people, and harmony with nature. Notice how harmony with yourself isn't mentioned?" I frowned. "That seems like a pretty big oversight." He laughed. "That's a very Western perspective. Here, the self isn't separate from those 3 harmonies. It's formed by them, sustained by them. But the key is balance. If your harmony with others comes at the expense of your harmony with God or nature, something's wrong. And in my case? In your case, I'd say your harmony with your family was destroying your harmony with yourself, which affects your harmony with everything else. Sometimes you have to disrupt one connection to restore balance to the whole." His words resonated deeply, giving philosophical weight to what I'd instinctively felt was necessary. It wasn't selfish to take this time for myself. It was essential for restoring a balance that had been off-kilter for far too long. Marcus became a friend and guide during my time in Bali, introducing me to local healers, artists, and experiences I might have missed on my own. Through him, I met Wayan, a traditional Balinese healer who performed a cleansing ceremony that left me feeling lighter than I had in years. I met Neoman, a silversmith who taught me to make a simple ring, my fingers clumsy but joyful in the creation. I met Maid, a chef who invited me into his kitchen to learn the secrets of Balinese cooking, laughing at my ineptitude with the mortar and pestle used to grind spices. And through these experiences, these connections with people who expected nothing from me but my presence and engagement, I began to rediscover parts of myself that had been buried under years of obligation and self-neglect. 2 weeks into my stay, I received a different kind of message from my sister. "We're back from Hawaii. It was weird without you. Mom and Dad are still mad, but I think I get it now. Call me when you're ready to talk." It was the first message that didn't demand something from me, that didn't seek to manipulate or guilt me into compliance. It felt like a small opening, a crack in the wall of family dynamics that had seemed impenetrable for so long. I didn't call immediately, not ready yet to break the spell of my time in Bali. But I did respond. Thank you for understanding. I'll call when I get back. I hope Hawaii was beautiful despite everything. She sent back a simple heart emoji, and something in me eased slightly at this tiny gesture of acceptance. As my 3-week stay drew to a close, I found myself torn between the pull of home and the freedom I'd found in Bali. Part of me wanted to do as Marcus had done, stay, build a new life in this place that had shown me what it felt like to be truly myself. You could, Marcus said, when I shared this thought over our now regular evening tea at his cafe. There's plenty of marketing work here for someone with your skills. Expat businesses, hotels, retreats, they all need help reaching Western clients. The possibility was tempting, but deep down, I knew it would be another form of running away. The real test, the real growth, would come from going back and building a life that honored my newfound sense of self while still connecting with the people and place I'd come from. I need to go back, I said finally. Not for them, but for me. I need to know I can be this version of myself there, not just here where it's easy. Marcus nodded approvingly. Now that sounds like a woman who's found her balance. My last day. In Bali, I performed my own small ritual at a temple near my villa. I wrote down all the patterns and behaviors I wanted to leave behind. The need for approval, the inability to say no, the tendency to sacrifice my own needs for others, and burned the paper in a small offering, watching the smoke rise and dissipate in the warm air. Then I wrote down what I wanted to take home with me: courage, boundaries, self-respect, balance, and tucked that paper into my wallet, a tangible reminder of the person I'd become during these 3 transformative weeks. The journey home was long, giving me plenty of time to prepare mentally for what awaited me. My family would want explanations, apologies, perhaps even promises that such a thing would never happen again. Before Bali, I might have given them what they wanted just to keep the peace. Now I knew better. I landed back in the States feeling both apprehensive and curiously calm. As I waited for my luggage at the baggage claim, I turned on my phone to see a message from Jessica. Let me know when you're back. I can pick you up from the airport. No guilt, no manipulation, just a simple offer of help. It was a hopeful sign. Just landed. That would be great, thanks, I texted back, including my arrival details. An hour later, as I wheeled my suitcase into the arrival area, I spotted Jessica waiting by the doors. She looked different somehow. Or perhaps it was my perception that had changed. She raised a hand in greeting, and I walked over, unsure what to expect. Welcome back, she said, giving me an awkward half hug. You look different, good different. Thanks, I replied, studying her face for signs of anger or resentment, but finding only uncertainty. How are Mom and Dad? Still processing, she said diplomatically as we walked to her car. It's been an interesting few weeks, but that's a conversation for when you're not jet-lagged. The drive to my apartment was filled with surprisingly comfortable small talk. Jessica telling me about Hawaii, beautiful but not as cultural as she'd hoped. Me sharing carefully selected stories about Bali, the temples, the food, the art. We didn't touch on the deeper issues, the elephant in the room of what my actions meant for our family dynamics going forward. As she pulled up in front of my building, Jessica turned to me with an unexpectedly serious expression. For what it's worth, I think I understand why you did it. I'm not saying Mom and Dad do, but I get it. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched by this admission. That means a lot. Don't thank me yet, she warned with a small smile. Sunday. Dinner's going to be epic, I laughed despite myself. I figured as much, but I'm ready for it. And as I unpacked in my apartment that evening, looking at the familiar surroundings with new eyes, I realized it was true. I was ready. Not for a fight, not for a withdrawal, but for an honest conversation about what our family could be if we all recognized and respected each other's boundaries and needs. The Sheila who had left for Bali 3 weeks ago might have approached that dinner with dread and a preemptive willingness to capitulate. But the Sheila who had returned was different, stronger, clearer, more certain of her worth and her right to stand firm in that worth. The coming days and weeks wouldn't be easy, I knew that. Changing long-established family patterns never was. But for the first time, I felt equipped to face the challenge, to advocate for a new kind of relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation and guilt. As I placed the paper from my Balinese ritual on my bedside table, a reminder of what I was bringing back with me, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Whatever happened next, I had given myself a priceless gift, the knowledge that I could stand on my own, make choices for myself, and find joy in the simple act of honoring my own needs. Bali had changed me, but the real transformation was yet to come. The transformation of returning to my life and reshaping it to reflect the person I'd discovered I could be. It wouldn't be easy, but as I drifted off to sleep in my own bed, thousands of miles from the island that had helped me find myself, I knew with bone-deep certainty that it would be worth it. Sunday arrived all too quickly. I'd spent the intervening days readjusting to my regular life, catching up at work, where Donna was eager to hear every detail of my great escape, as she called it, cleaning my apartment, restocking my refrigerator, and generally preparing myself mentally for the confrontation to come. My mother had called exactly once, her message terse and to the point. "We expect you for dinner on Sunday at 6. We have a lot to discuss." No mention of my trip, no questions about how it had been or whether I'd enjoyed myself. Just the summons, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed, at least for me, and I was determined that they would understand that by the end of the evening. I arrived at my parents' house at exactly 6, a bottle of Balinese coffee in hand as a peace offering of sorts. Jessica's car was already in the driveway, and I felt a small surge of gratitude that she would be there. At least one person in the family seemed open to understanding my perspective. My father opened the door before I could ring the bell, his expression unreadable as he took in the sight of me standing on the doorstep. "You're here," he said, as if he'd half expected me to disappear again. "I said I would be," I replied evenly. He nodded once, then stepped aside to let me enter. The house was the same as always, same furniture, same photos on the walls, same slightly too cold air conditioning. But it felt different to me now, less intimidating somehow. My mother was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove with more force than was strictly necessary. She glanced up as I entered, her lips thinning slightly. "Sheila," she acknowledged with a nod. "Hi, Mom," I said, holding out the coffee. "I brought this from Bali. The locals say it's some of the best in the world." She looked at the package for a long moment before taking it from me, her expression softening just a fraction. "Thank you. Dinner's almost ready. You can help Jessica set the table." It was such a normal exchange, so reminiscent of every Sunday dinner before, that I almost laughed. Here we were, acting as if I hadn't disappeared to the other side of the world, as if we weren't about to have one of the most important conversations of our family life. Jessica was already placing silverware on the dining table. She looked up as I entered and gave me a small, encouraging smile. "Ready for this?" she murmured as I moved to help her. "As I'll ever be," I replied, arranging napkins at each place setting. Dinner itself was a strangely subdued affair. We ate, my mother's pot roast, the same meal she'd prepared when all this had started, and made small talk about the weather, about a neighbor's new landscaping, about anything but the true reason we were gathered there. It wasn't until dessert was served, apple pie, my favorite, that my father finally cleared his throat and addressed the elephant in the room. "So," he said, setting down his fork with a deliberate motion, "I think it's time we talked about your disappearing act." I took a deep breath, centering myself before responding. "It wasn't a disappearing act, Dad. I told you I was going on vacation. The only thing that changed was the destination. Without telling us, my mother interjected, her voice tight. Do you have any idea how worried we were when you didn't show up in Hawaii? We thought something had happened to you. I messaged you as soon as I landed to let you know I was safe, I pointed out, and I checked in regularly after that. That's not the point, Sheila, my father said, his voice rising slightly. The point is that you deliberately deceived us. After we went to the trouble and expense of arranging our vacation to coincide with yours, which I specifically asked you not to do, I interrupted, keeping my voice calm but firm. I told you I wanted to go alone. You chose not to respect that boundary. Boundary? My mother looked genuinely confused by the word. Sheila, we're your family. There are no boundaries in family. And there it was, the fundamental disconnect that had been at the root of our issues all along. To them, family meant unlimited access, unlimited expectations, unlimited compliance. To me, it had come to mean unlimited giving with little recognition of my own needs or desires. That's where you're wrong, Mom, I said gently. Healthy families have boundaries. They respect each other's needs and wishes. They don't manipulate or guilt each other into compliance. My father's face darkened. Is that what you think we do? Manipulate you? Dad, you and Mom booked tickets to Hawaii after I explicitly told you I wanted to go alone. What would you call that? Being a family, he exploded, pounding a fist on the table. Wanting to spend time together, is that such a crime? No, of course not, I said, working to keep my voice steady. But ignoring what I explicitly asked for in favor of what you wanted, that's not about being a family, that's about control. My mother gasped as if I'd slapped her. How dare you, after everything we've done for you? What exactly have you done for me lately, Mom? I asked, the question simple but pointed. In the last 5 years, what have you done for me that wasn't actually about what you wanted? Silence fell over the table as my parents exchanged glances, clearly caught off guard by the directness of my question. We're your parents, my mother finally said, as if that explained everything. We don't have to justify— Actually, you do, I interrupted, feeling strangely calm despite the tension crackling in the air. Because I'm an adult, and our relationship should be based on mutual respect, not just parenthood. I love you both, but the way we've been relating to each other isn't healthy, and it needs to change. Jessica, who had been silent throughout this exchange, suddenly spoke up. She's right, you know. 3 sets of eyes turned to her in surprise. What? My father asked, clearly not having expected her to take my side. She's right, Jessica repeated, straightening in her chair. We've been using Sheila as a piggy bank for years. Family vacations that she pays for, emergency expenses that always seem to come up when she gets a bonus, shopping trips that somehow end up on her credit card. It's not fair, and if she hadn't done something drastic like this, we'd have just kept doing it. I stared at my sister, stunned by her candor and unexpected support. This was not the Jessica I thought I knew, the entitled younger sibling who always seemed to expect handouts. When had she developed this self-awareness? My parents looked equally shocked, glancing between us as if trying to determine when they'd lost control of the conversation, of us. I don't think that's a fair characterization, my mother finally said. But there was a note of uncertainty in her voice that hadn't been there before. Isn't it? Jessica pressed. When was the last time either of you paid for anything significant? For Sheila? When was the last time you even asked her what she wanted, instead of just expecting her to go along with whatever the rest of us wanted? My father looked genuinely perplexed. But Sheila has always been the responsible one, the one who takes care of things. That's just who she is. No, Dad, I said gently. That's who you needed me to be. That's who I became because it was the only way to earn your approval. But it's not all of who I am, and it can't be who I am anymore. Another silence fell, this one heavier with the weight of realizations slowly dawning. My mother's eyes glistened with unshed tears, whether from hurt or understanding, I couldn't tell. My father looked somewhere between confused and defeated, a man confronting a paradigm shift he hadn't seen coming. "What do you want from us, then?" he asked finally, his voice gruff but not angry. It was a good question, one I'd spent much of my time in Bali contemplating. What did I want from my family going forward? Not complete separation. Despite everything, I loved them and wanted them in my life. But not the old patterns either. The endless giving with little reciprocity. "I want a relationship based on mutual respect," I said carefully. "I want you to see me as a whole person with my own needs and desires, not just as a resource to be tapped whenever you want something. I want to be able to say no without being guilt-tripped or manipulated. And I want us to be honest with each other even when it's uncomfortable." "And if we can't give you that?" my mother asked, a challenge in her tone. "Then we'll have a very limited relationship," I replied simply, "because I won't go back to how things were before. I can't." The finality in my voice seemed to penetrate in a way my earlier words hadn't. This wasn't a negotiation or a temporary rebellion. This was a fundamental shift in how I would engage with them going forward, take it or leave it. "I see," my father said. And for perhaps the first time in our relationship, I believed he actually did see. Not fully, not completely, but enough to recognize that something had changed irrevocably. "I'd like to hear about your trip," my mother said suddenly, the non sequitur taking me by surprise. "About Bali. It must have been interesting." It was an olive branch of sorts, small but significant. Not an acceptance of everything I'd said, but an acknowledgement that I'd had this experience that was mine alone, and she wanted to know about it. "It was beautiful," I said, allowing myself to smile. "The culture, the people, the landscape. It was unlike anywhere I've ever been." And so the conversation shifted, tension easing slightly as I shared stories of Balinese ceremonies and jungle treks and traditional cooking lessons. My parents listened with what seemed like genuine interest, asking questions that weren't loaded with judgment or comparison. Jessica chimed in occasionally, especially when I mentioned the art and crafts I'd encountered, a shared interest we'd rarely acknowledged. It wasn't a complete resolution. The issues we'd raised were too deep, too entrenched to be solved in a single conversation. But it was a beginning, a first step toward a different kind of family dynamic. As the evening wound down and I prepared to leave, my father surprised me by pulling me into a somewhat awkward hug. "You've changed," he said gruffly. "For the better, I hope," I replied, returning the hug. "Time will tell," he said, but there was a hint of a smile on his face. "But you seem stronger, more certain." "I am," I confirmed. "And that's a good thing, Dad, even if it takes some getting used to." He nodded thoughtfully, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt like he was seeing me, really seeing me, not as an extension of himself or a fulfillment of his expectations, but as my own person. My mother's goodbye was more reserved, a quick embrace and a murmured, "We'll talk more." But even that felt like progress, an admission that there was more to be said, more to be worked through. Jessica walked me to my car, the night air cool against our skin. "That went better than I expected," she admitted. "Thanks to you in part," I said, turning to face her. "I didn't expect you to speak up like that." She shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "Yeah, well, Hawaii gave me some time to think too. About how we've been treating you. About the kind of sister I've been." She hesitated, then added, "I'm sorry, Sheila, for taking you for granted, for expecting you to always pick up the slack." The apology, so unexpected and sincere, brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you," I said simply, knowing anything more would choke me up completely. "So what now?" she asked as I unlocked my car. "Where do we go from here?" "One day at a time," I replied, the words feeling right as I said them. "We try to build something better, something healthier, and we see if it's possible." And if it's not? The question was soft, uncertain. Then we'll know we tried, I said firmly. But I think it is possible. Different, but possible. As I drove home that night, I felt a curious mixture of emotions: hope, trepidation, pride, sadness, determination. The conversation had been difficult, but necessary, the first step in what would likely be a long and sometimes painful process of redefining my relationship with my family, but I was ready for it, in a way I never could have been before Bali, before I'd given myself the gift of putting my own needs first for once. Whatever came next, I would face it as this new version of myself, the Sheila who had found her voice, her boundaries, her balance. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of renegotiating relationships, of testing boundaries and adjusting expectations. There were missteps on both sides, moments when my parents slipped back into old patterns of guilt and manipulation, moments when I reacted with perhaps more firmness than was strictly necessary, still protective of my newly established boundaries. But there was progress too, small changes that signaled larger shifts in our family dynamic. My mother began to ask about my preferences rather than simply making decisions and expecting me to go along with them. My father, in his own gruff way, showed more interest in my work and my life outside the family. And Jessica and I discovered a more equal footing, a sisterhood based on mutual respect rather than the giver-taker dynamic we'd fallen into for so long. A month after my return from Bali, I made another significant change. I moved to a new apartment, one my family had never visited. It was a symbolic fresh start as much as a practical one, a space that was entirely mine, with no history of family dynamics embedded in its walls. It was slightly smaller than my previous place, but with a better view and a feeling of openness that appealed to me. I decorated it with items I'd brought back from Bali, a hand-woven textile hung on the wall, small wooden carvings of Balinese deities placed on shelves, a painting by a local artist that captured the vibrant greens and golds of the rice terraces. When I invited my family over for the first time for a housewarming dinner, I prepared myself. There was a moment as they entered when I saw them take in these touches, these tangible reminders of the experience that had changed me. They said little about them directly, but I could see in their expressions a dawning recognition that this wasn't a phase or a temporary rebellion. This was a fundamental shift in who I was and how I would live my life going forward. "It's lovely," my mother said, and I could tell she meant it. "Very you." "Thank you," I replied, touched by the acknowledgement, small as it was, that I had a distinct identity, distinct tastes, distinct preferences that weren't always aligned with hers. That dinner was the first of many small steps toward a new kind of family relationship, one based on choice rather than obligation, on mutual enjoyment rather than expectation. We didn't become perfect overnight. There were still moments of tension, still occasions when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But each time, I stood firm in my boundaries, and slowly, incrementally, my family began to respect them. As for the family vacations that had been the catalyst for all this change, we found a compromise that worked for everyone. We took one short weekend trip together each year, with costs divided equally among the adults. And the rest of our travels were our own, mine to Hawaii the following year, alone as I'd originally planned, my parents to Arizona to visit old friends, Jessica, to an art retreat in New Mexico. The freedom to come together by choice rather than obligation made those shared experiences all the more meaningful, all the more genuine. And the space between them gave us room to grow as individuals, to bring new perspectives and experiences back to our family circle. 3 years after my Bali escape, as I sat on the beach in Maui watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold, I thought about the long, sometimes difficult journey that had brought me to this place. Not just the physical journey, though that had been significant too, but the emotional and psychological one, from a woman who couldn't say no to a woman who knew her own worth and wasn't afraid to claim it. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica, enjoying paradise? I smiled and typed back, absolutely, you should join me next time. Her response came quickly, only if I can pay my own way. And there it was, the evidence of how far we'd all come. A simple exchange that would have been unimaginable 3 years earlier. My sister acknowledging that my invitation didn't constitute an obligation for me to pay, me extending the invitation as a genuine desire for her company rather than a response to guilt or expectation. As the last sliver of sun disappeared below the horizon, I felt a sense of completion, of coming full circle. I had fought for this moment, this simple joy of sitting alone on a Hawaiian beach, answering to no one's desires but my own. And in fighting for it, I had found something far more valuable than a vacation. I had found myself and a family relationship that, while imperfect, was finally based on mutual respect and love rather than obligation and manipulation. The journey hadn't been easy, and it wasn't completely over. Maintaining healthy boundaries was an ongoing process, not a one-time achievement. But as I watched the first stars appear in the darkening sky, I knew with absolute certainty that it had been worth it. Every uncomfortable conversation, every moment of standing firm in the face of guilt or anger, every step toward a more authentic self, all of it had led me here, to this moment of quiet joy and deep self-acceptance. And that, more than any destination, was the true gift of my journey.